I appreciate this opportunity to share a few words with you. Bear with me, I'm in the process of cancer treatment and my eyes are not as good as they should be. But there is a part, speaking to the young people that we have here today, about a part of American history that changed the world as well as the United States. Your image of American history and the wars that have been fought in the last 250 years has changed so much that the war I participated in is almost forgotten. However, World War II was the one war that united our country into one great fighting machine, both military as well as the home front. We became one nation, geared to winning a war that was not ours in the beginning. And the young men were sent to do a job that they never expected to have to do, as well as the women that pitched in on the home front to back up these troops and helping produce war materials of all capacities. Now I've gotten my commercial in, so we'll go on from there. The Army Air Corps was formed before World War I in 1907, and it was the first part of the Signal Corps. That sounds maybe kind of crazy, but the communications between the aircraft and the ground was nil. The only way they could communicate was waving flags like the Navy still does in an armada in times of war. And the reason that they could do this is because the first airplanes in the World War I were open cockpit type, so all you had to do was look out over the side of the fuselage to see what was happening down below and get his directions. One of the things that was part of the pilot in those days was to carry hand grenades and bombs, and they just tossed them out of the cockpit when they felt it was necessary. Later in the war, they came up with the idea of mounting machine guns ahead of the cockpit so that the pilot could fire, and they were synchronized so the bullets would go through the propeller and not destroy the propeller. The War Department, after much debate, dropped the name Army in front of the Air Corps, and after World War I it became strictly the Air Corps. And when the World War II broke out in Europe in 1938, the Air Corps was pretty much unprepared. They only had about 800 active airplanes, and when they found out that when they started putting them to use, there's only about 700 that really were war-worthy, and became obsolete back in December 1941 when Pearl Harbor was bombed. I enlisted in the Army Air Corps in 1943, began my short career that I never expected. Went through basic training, through 3 months of college training detachment at Butler University in Indianapolis, and there down to San Antonio to what they call the classification center that gave us either a pilot, bombardier, or navigator. At that time, everybody wanted to be a flyboy pilot, of course, and they were washing him out right and left, so I decided maybe I'd better go with the navigator. We sent to navigator school there in Texas and graduated as a second lieutenant. From there I was sent to the Air Transport Command in Long Beach, California to ferry bombers to the South Pacific. The bombers were too big, they couldn't put them on a cargo ship, so we had to fly them down there. And after 2 months, I made 2 trips to Australia, and they found out that I was combat worthy, so they sent me up to Walla Walla, Washington. That's a city, you know, they like to, well, they named twice. But anyway, we got our training there, and all of a sudden they told us we were going to ship out, and they shipped us out by boat. What an embarrassed situation of a bunch of flyboys going to combat on a ship instead of flying over there. But anyway, we arrived in New Guinea. After several bombing missions in New Guinea, we moved to the whole group to a small island northeast of there called Morotai, and we operated out of there for a few months. We bombed Manila in the Philippines, left some space for MacArthur and his troops to return to the Philippines, and then we finally located on a small island north and east of Leyte in the Philippines called Samara. This was a very small island, and as far as our strip is concerned, there was water on both ends of the strip, so that in order to get our 24s off, it was consigned really as a fighter pilot strip, so it was short. We got the 24s with the tail sticking over one water, and when we took off, we hoped we were going to make it to the end without hitting water on the other side. But it was a place that we called base, and we flew out of there a number of times as far as Borneo. And the B-24 was a 4-engine aircraft that was designed for 12,000 pounds of bombs, 8 tons of gasoline, but we could only fly 2,700 miles. Then we had to get out and walk. But our only means of navigation back in those days, with the majority of the missions being over water, we drove red drift off the waves. It was the only way we could tell where the plane was drifting right or left. And we had no checks like if you were flying over land, what we call landmarks and so forth. The missions would be anywhere from 10 to 12 hours. We'd leave 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning, and was able to get a noonday fix on the stars. That was one way we checked our course. And then when it turned daytime, possibly get a fix on the sun using the sextant. Now the sextant is an instrument that old-time people with sailing boats back in centuries before used to find their way across the ocean. And there were times that things became a little bit tense, because when you hit the target, you hoped that, or land, you hoped that you were in line for your target. But let's see here where we are. One of the other jobs that I had was to spot the bombs. When we dropped them, we were in a formation of maybe 6 aircraft, and my position on the aircraft was closest to the bomb bay, so I could get out there and kind of stick my head over and watch. And one day I forgot to put my parachute on, which was kind of fun because the plane jumped about 50 feet. But I flew a total of 39 bombing missions with targets in New Guinea, Borneo, and the Philippines. And we were very fortunate to escape with only flak and bullet holes in the planes. No casualties, no injuries. We considered ourselves very, very fortunate. I got a couple of things I'll show you, and they'll wind up here. This is a small model of the plane that we were flying. 4 engines, twin tail. Like I say, the bomb load was about 12,000 pounds. This was my computer. Doesn't look like anything you see today. But we were able to follow course, get airspeed, ground speed, and anything else that we really needed from this. Very valuable piece of information. Believe it or not, this is an original. This is a map we used to plot. Now keep in mind, I only had a desk that was 2 feet wide. You can't see from here, but these are bombing pictures, targets we hit, originals. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.